Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intel FutureGen Q&A. For those who don't know, Intel FutureGen is a leadership program ran by NSE, supported by Intel, and we kind of give access and insights into the industry of games and esports. And today, I'm joined by none other than Kieran Holmes-Darby, gaming director at Formula E and previously at Excel Esports. Hello, Kieran.
Hi, mate. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Good, I'm good. So I guess for those who don't know, if you tell us a bit about Formula E, what is Formula E?
Yeah, so when I joined Formula E, given my background, I think everyone thought it was just a game or the esports version of a car racing championship, but it's not. It's real car racing. So we race electric cars, all electric around street circuits. So that's kind of our USP is, it's the world's first net zero carbon sport. So sustainability is like a key pillar in what we do. All electric and in the middle of cities because you can do that if it's all electric, right? So super fun. I've only been to one race so far in Mexico, and yeah, who doesn't love cars driving really quickly around a track? So yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I had the privilege of going to a Formula E race maybe like 4 or 5 years ago when it was like last in London in Battersea. Um, but yeah, really cool event. And actually, they did have a gaming activation at that event, but we'll touch on kind of gaming now. So, um, gaming director at Formula E, what does that mean?
Yeah, great title. If growing up I could have picked a title, I think I'd have picked gaming director. Um, yeah. So what does gaming director mean? Well, ultimately, my role is to come into Formula E, which is a very well established sport. It's in its eighth season. It's an FIA regulated world championship. It's very strong commercially. It's got a good fan base, and you know that company wants to unlock a new fan base through gaming, right? So it needs to figure out how it approaches the gaming world. I mean, we're all very familiar in the gaming and esports space that the younger demographic, me and below, are engaging through gaming. Gaming is kind of the key media that people engage through, and that audience is very hard to reach through traditional forms of media, whether that be TV or advertising or whatever. So as a as a as a tier one sport that wants to continue to grow, gaming forms a really big part of its audience growth strategy. So my job is to come in and basically figure that out and help them with that and figure out what that means for Formula E. Now they've actually done quite a lot already, so I'm not coming into like a completely blank slate. They've got licenses in different games like R Factor 2, Real Racing 3, and games like this, and they've also got a gaming arena at all of their EPREs. So we go to everywhere around the world. That the next few races are like Rome, Monaco, Berlin, Jakarta, Vancouver, London, New York. So they go all around the world, and they take a gaming arena with them. So they're already doing quite a lot, and it's just about figuring out what they're not doing, what potentially they should stop doing, and sort of bring it all together in one coherent strategy. That's the goal, anyway.
Nice. No, I mean, yeah, sounds great. And I like how you said, young demographic, your age and below. So you're not putting yourself in the older demographic yet. But you mentioned it includes gaming. Does that include like esports for Formula E, or is that part of the journey that you're kind of looking into now?
Yeah, so Formula E has an esports product called Accelerate. It's only run for one season, so it ran last season, and it was kind of its primary goal was to fill the gap that obviously the pandemic made when it came to traditional sport. It was very difficult to put on real races, so they had this esports competition which filled that gap. So again, part of the job is to figure out what's next for that in a world where we have real racing back, and obviously the primary product is the race. How does an esports competition tie into that overall gaming strategy? And what's the goal of it? What's that's all part of the job. So
Yeah. That makes sense. And obviously, before Formula E, you were obviously at Excel, uh, esports organization. How have you kind of found it going from a purely kind of esports organization now and taking that knowledge that you've learned there and going into a kind of a more traditional sport and taking that with you?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I spent 7 years of my life building Excel with my brother, and it was a startup, right? Even by the time I moved on, potentially it was a scale up, but ultimately it was still startup culture, and it still had a lot to figure out. And stepping into Formula E, you're stepping into a very established business, with a business model that is proven, and they're kind of, quite a few steps as a company in terms of growth, right? They're just older, and they're quite a few steps beyond. So when you walk into a company like that, it's quite daunting. When
Mm.
my entire professional career has been startup life and entrepreneur, and you know not really having a boss and things like this, stepping into a much larger organization where I have a boss and I have work set for me. And it was a big, I suppose, change for me, but one that I wanted. For me personally, I wanted to step into a bigger organization because I felt like I would learn a lot more. There comes a point in an entrepreneur's journey where you've been learning on the job so much, you get to a point where you feel like, in order to kind of grow and have self development, you need to sort of move somewhere else to grow. And I kind of got to that point. So for me, it was a big adjustment period. I'm only like 7 weeks actually into the job, so
Wow.
I'm still learning loads, and I hope to continue to learn for many years to come. That for me was the big adjustment, though, was stepping into that bigger organization. There's processes you need to learn. It's all about communication internally in the organization. You can't just sort of shout across a room and the whole organization hears you. You need to actually figure out who you need to talk to for what purpose. So yeah, big adjustment period, but great learning experience, and already feel like I'm getting my feet under the desk.
Awesome. So, I mean, I guess we'll talk a bit about Excel and the kind of and the startup process of Excel. Then, obviously, with Intel FutureGen, uh, primarily, everyone on everyone on the cohort is at university, and the people watching will most likely be at university. And you and your brother actually started Excel whilst you're at university. So, can you tell us a bit about what that process was like?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I had no idea what I was doing. That's quite clear. I purely was passionate about esports and felt like the UK was underserved as an esports market. If you look at, you know, across the globe, they were doing some amazing things. Even in North America, that the optics and the envies of the world were already sort of kicking on and doing some amazing stuff. And in the UK, we didn't really have anything to hold on to, and I felt like there was a massive gap for a brand in the UK to own the market, but also give the UK something to shout about. So that was kind of what it was born out of, just a passion and I suppose an understanding that there was a gap. And yeah, knew absolutely nothing. Knew definitely not how to run a business or how to find funding or any of that stuff. So had to figure it all out on the job. The university was super um, helpful, actually. So I went to Lancaster, and they had this kind of entrepreneurs grant where you could apply. You had to submit sort of I think it was like a one-pager business plan, and as to why you needed the money. And I mean, it was a really small amount of money I got. I mean, maybe 1,500 quid, 2 grand, I think, or something like that. And that basically got us the ability to do the basics, like build a website, fund some event activations, and get some of our teams to events they wouldn't have been able to do. So then the organization was respected by players and the community alike, because it was helping players do something they couldn't do without us. So that was how it all started. And that funding plus some money out of my brother's pocket, as he was already working at the time, kind of got us going. And then from there, it just there's, as with all kind of entrepreneurial ventures, I think there's an element of luck and timing. You obviously create your own luck. You put yourself in a good position, and you're in a position to kind of take advantage of those, I suppose, windfalls or luck that come your way. But there's always a bit of timing involved, and I think we hit the right time, and we were kind of on an esports tailwind when it came to also investment. There are a lot of investors looking at esports and wanting to get involved and not really knowing how, especially in the UK, and we kind of provide them an avenue to do that. So yeah, it was a bit of timing, bit of luck, but also a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and hard work, and sleepless nights.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and I get obviously the university asked you to put together a one-page business plan. Did either of you at the time have an idea about what a business plan actually was, or did you have to go and research into it? What kind of components did you put into that plan?
Yeah, so my brother and I made a good pair, to be honest, because he had already finished a management and leadership course. He was down at Exeter, so he had many, many more business skills than I did. But I was kind of, I suppose, the the positive energy in the process, and sort of the go getter, and I suppose risk taker and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas he was a little bit more cautious, but had a much more kind of business operational understanding. I like to think I've learned that now, but at the time I definitely didn't have that. And I think we made a good pair. And he had a bit of an idea. I was willing to throw myself into it and learn and figure out the bits that I didn't know. And yeah, we came up with something that was pretty compelling. It doesn't quite scratch the surface of what we did later on, which was a 170-page business plan. But to start us off, it wasn't a bad way to get going.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so obviously in the past when you've been building out the team at Excel, and when I say team, I obviously don't mean the players. I mean also like the head office staff, the behind the scenes staff, and also at Formula E, as you probably start to look to develop out your team a bit more. When you're looking at applications and CVs, there's obviously a lot of people with similar experience, but how do you think people can make themselves stand out on an application? And is there any kind of pointers you might have there?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about that question is I've kind of just been through this process myself. So when I started a business, there's no CV, there's no interview process or anything like that. But when you move roles, you've got to get your CV in order. You've got to understand what your skill set is, what you bring to an organization, what you've learned along the way. And I wasn't hired in the role that I'm in now um, for my degree necessarily. I mean, purely because my degree was a law degree, so it doesn't really help you become a gaming director. But having a degree was super important because it showed that I had 3 years of dedicated hard work, and I came out with something to be proud of. Um, Add on to that, the entrepreneurial venture I'd been on. That's pretty cool to have on a CV to have done that. But ultimately, it also it's not clear what your skill set is when you've been an entrepreneur. So you have to really understand where you excel, pardon the pun, and create a CV that sort of reflects that, and understand what roles in different organizations you could potentially fulfill with your skill set. And that's not necessarily just experience. That's broadly kind of your personality and your personality traits, I suppose, and what they lend themselves well to. So for me, being slightly more outgoing and I suppose annoying, some people would say, talkative, and put myself out there, things like business development and these sorts of skills came pretty naturally to me. It wasn't, obviously I learned along the way and built out those skills as I went, but those skills were sort of skills I inherently had and wanted to drum up when I was writing a CV. So I think that's a key piece when you're applying for jobs, is to really think about what you're good at, and don't hide what you're not so good at. Be honest, and sort of, this is what I'm good at. this is what I'm not so good at. This is my areas that I want to learn. You don't necessarily put that on your CV, but through the interview process, that'll come out, right? And I think that self-awareness of what you're good at and what you're not good at will put you in good stead. So for me, I'm looking for people that are honest about their good bits, and also honest about their bits that they want to learn. Have a obviously passion for the industry, right? A passion for gaming and esports, a passion for the company that you're interviewing for, obviously as well, not just specifically more broadly gaming and esports, but a passion for the company. You've done your research, you've done your homework, you understand the company and its position, etc., etc. And then, yeah, it's not depending on the role. Obviously, it's very dependent on what we're looking for. So if it's a marketing role, a marketing degree would certainly help, or some form of experience at university where you've maybe ran some social channels, ran a media campaign, or whatever. Those sorts of bits of experience help. Or if it's a product management role, it could be that you've put on a esports tournament at university and you ran it from start to finish. You sourced all of the products that you needed or the equipment you needed. You even maybe got a commercial partner in to support it. These sorts of things that you can do, I think are super, super valuable things you can talk about if you are coming fresh out of uni and you haven't actually had a job yet, right? You haven't got any real world experience, but you've still got stuff from university you can talk about.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, it's quite interesting with like gaming and esports, is it's one of the industries you can start to gain experience at whilst you're at university, by joining those gaming and esports societies. And I think that's often overlooked by candidates when they're applying for roles, is they kind of take that experience for granted, and they don't list that out, and they don't identify when they had to start, do an event with very little support and get equipment and get deals with equipment companies or things like that. They just, in their eyes, they sent an email off, they got an agreement, and it was done, but they don't actually recognize the value of that. So yeah, it's a super valid point that people should be listing that off on their CVs and knowing where how to word it, and where to list it as well. So talking about kind of, I know you mentioned there, not really, you don't want to hear about too many negatives, as long you can hear about negatives, but as long as there's a kind of a positive on top of that. But in terms of like your own career and your own kind of like lessons learned along the way, is there anything that you wish you kind of knew before you went into it? Anything you learned along the way you wish you were like, okay, I wish I really knew that before I started doing this?
So much that we could be here all day, to be honest, to talk through it, because the nature of my situation was, as I said, I was learning on the job, had no experience going in. I made a shed load of mistakes. But what I think is good is, it's absolutely fine to make mistakes, and it's absolutely fine to get things wrong, as long as you don't get it wrong twice. Basically, is kind of the biggest lesson that I learned along the way. You don't annoy anyone if you get things wrong. You annoy people if you get things wrong twice, or if you haven't learned from your mistakes. So yeah, I made loads and loads and loads of mistakes, but I tried to make it sort of my goal to learn from all of those. Fail fast. Failure is good because it teaches you something. And don't make the same mistake again, because that's a surefire way to annoy your boss or your higher ups if you make the same mistake twice. So yeah, I don't think that really answered your question, but
No, I think that's a super valuable like skill to know. Is like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine to fail, but yeah, don't don't fail twice.
I think it's absolutely fine to be proactive. Like, get ahead of it. Try things. If you bring that kind of proactive, positive energy, but you get things wrong, that I'd much rather that than you worry about doing anything because you think you're going to upset someone, you think you're going to get something wrong. That that's ultimately unproductive. I think get things done. Obviously, try your best to get the right people across it and not make mistakes. But if you make a mistake, no one's gonna shoot you down. You just might get a pointer in the right direction and then learn from that and don't make the same mistake again.
Yeah, spot on. And in terms of so the obviously we've got a lot of students at the moment at university who are looking to get into esports, and in their head they're saying, I want to get into esports. For that, for a lot of people, that will mean, or they think it means, going into an esports organization or a team. But do you think they're kind of thinking about that in a too kind of narrow-minded way, and they should be looking wider?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, ultimately, I suppose the majority of hirers in kind of esports in the UK would be potentially, yeah, teams, organizations, although you are seeing more like solution providers come in and, even dedicated marketing agencies and things like that. So I think roles are opening up more broadly in esports specifically. But then if you widen the net just one step, you're talking about the kind of wider gaming industry. And in the games industry, it's massive, right? It's huge. And lots of different publishers are looking at how they would potentially unlock the slightly more competitive side of gaming. So there's roles there. And then if you widen the net again, you're looking at completely other different industries, which is where I sit now. I sit in the traditional sports industry. So I'm not even in the gaming and esports industry anymore. But that, that industry, the sports industry in general, is more and more looking at how they unlock gaming and esports for their teams, leagues, different rights holders, even brands, right? Like even brands that work in traditional sports currently are looking to kind of unlock the gaming esports industry. So yeah, I mean, I think the horizons are only getting bigger. And for me, it was super important to actually take a step slightly outside, because I think that's super helpful to show that you can kind of grow a gaming business inside something that's got nothing to do with gaming and esports in of its own right. So yeah, for me, it was super important to step out, and I think that you're going to see more and more gaming product manager roles or gaming, whatever roles cropping up in other organizations.
Fantastic. Okay. And yeah, to echo your point, I think that like people's games and esports knowledge is a lot more valuable to those companies outside the esports ecosystem, and students can definitely take advantage of that when they're applying for roles.
And if I could say one more thing as well, the us lot as gaming and esports natives, we learn things like how to build a digital community, how to engage, digitally via social media, or even, we're generally a bit more up to date on things like NFTs and digital collectibles and things like that. Those things are so valuable in loads of organizations. So you could even just strip the gaming bit out of it and sort of just think more along the kind of digital fan engagement piece, which is also what I'm doing quite a lot of at Formula E. And there's loads of, potential roles there. So yeah, I think we can broaden a bit.
100%. The amount of companies and brands that we speak to, and they've never heard of Discord before.
Exactly.
And we're like, that's where your audience is. They're all they're all on Discord. That you can't get to them through traditional social channels. Like they're creating communities in these private servers. So how do you reach those? So yeah, totally agree with that. And on that note, I mean, we're going to transition over to the private Q&A with the Intel FutureGen cohort. But to all of those watching the public broadcast now, thanks for tuning in. This file will be made available and be on the Intel FutureGen hub. And thanks for your time today, Kieran. Good luck with the next couple of years at Formula E. Really excited to see what you achieve there. So
thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.